Hello, everyone. My name is Marshall Hendricks, software architect at Rise 8. Today we'll be having a talk about the state of Federal IaaS, infrastructure as a service. I'll start off with a little anecdote about my own early experience with it. So, a lot of my stories start off nowadays 20 years ago, and this one is no different. I was dating a woman who was a Yale graduate and a science journalism editor. She said one day, I have a lot of these grid computing publications coming across my desk. You should have a read. Now, that's not how things were done back then, so I shrugged my shoulders and went on about my day. Fast forward 20 years, and I guess I decided I better listen more to people in the know. A weakness that thankfully I've outgrown. Today I want to introduce our panel experts. We have James Guido Crocker, Bespin CTO. Guido is one of the founders of Bespin, has grown the organization from 9 to 300 active members in a single year's time. Bespin is providing a DevSecOps digital service environment for mobile, web, and cloud native development across the Air Force. He's also established a digital university to design to train and certify DoD cyber warriors. Next to him is Adelina Colaku. Google customer engineer, where she serves as a trusted technical advisor for the Department of Defense and intelligence communities as they adopt Google Cloud. Previously, she supported the Department of State leadership in organizing interagency efforts to combat disinformation. Also at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and delivered research to the White House on U.S. adversaries on 5G, microelectronics, and quantum technologies. She's also a Fulbright scholar and alum. And then finally, Nav Sagoo, Microsoft Azure specialist. He is Azure Apps and Innovation Specialist at Microsoft. He's been supporting the DoD customers with their digital transformation. Application development, delivery, and adoption of cloud technologies for several years. He works with software organizations across the Air Force, supporting their mission outcomes and enabling delivery of cloud-native applications. So today, we're going to try to address some questions along the lines of what I've characterized as our infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, which is another talk later on. Do-it-yourself projects anymore. The hyperscalers provide a large amount of economies of scale, and move away from evaluating strictly on price to value and outcomes at the pace of mission needs and evolution. And then finally, a buy/rent versus make. Today is going to be on discussion. We'll be focused on buy versus rent. So to get started, we're going to take a look at things from peeking forward and then working our way back. Where might things be in 5 years? And so peeking down the road, we're aware of the joint warfighting cloud capability and the IC's commercial cloud enterprises. And wanted to ask, we'll start with Adelina. Your perspectives on how some of these DoD enterprise clouds might be evolving over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to be here on the panel today. I think something that GWCC sort of illustrates for us is this fit-for-purpose cloud concept in which we're gravitating and migrating towards multi-cloud applications. So there's this recognition that we go to commercial sort of cloud providers now that offer a level of expertise. We no longer host our data services on-prem. I think that's a really important realization. And then as well, there's this, along with the theme of multi-cloud, there's this understanding that as I said, fit-for-purpose cloud. So while we can go to Oracle for our databases and Microsoft for Microsoft servers, we can turn to Google for data applications. And so you, as sort of an IC customer, can decide what you want to go to these various cloud service providers for. And I think that's really powerful.
Oh, excellent. So, I'm sorry, Nav. Any perspectives on DoD enterprise clouds down the road?
Yeah, thanks again for having me on the panel. This is Nav from Microsoft. It's really phenomenal to see the adoption of cloud in general across the DoD. When I first started working, I was supporting some of our intelligence customers, and they were just getting started. The C2S contract was awarded, and they were just getting started trying to figure out what this cloud thing is, how to even start to think about application rationalization, and I would put together these spreadsheets of the cost savings they would get. A lot of that is still, I think, to some degree relevant. As you're thinking about the journey that DoD has taken or government has taken so far, we probably see most adoption with the intelligence community, right? And then after that, with a lot of the civilian and federal agencies. DoD is certainly catching up, but there's a lot of catching up to do. And I think that largely speaks to the sort of mission that DoD has. It's not just about thinking of a simple lift and shift migration to the cloud. DoD has specific needs to figure out how do they need to operate at a global scale in a global theater where always the dynamics of how we are working, how we are supporting our national security and defending our nation and our partners is constantly evolving with how our adversaries, who are increasingly becoming more technologically adept and increasingly using more technological, advanced solutions to think about cybersecurity or attacks in general. So, when I think about where DoD might be in 5 to 10 years, I think there is certainly a rapid acceleration of that, but it's going to be, a few years before DoD really figures out that DoD cloud first should be the primary, focal point where DoD should begin with, and then use extensions of cloud, hybrid on-premises infrastructure as a way to make sure they have the sort of tactical edge resiliency or forward deployed operations. Right now, what we see is they typically start with their on-premises environments and then think of cloud sometimes as a backup solution or as maybe a migration for a couple of applications. I think that ideology or that thinking has to fundamentally change in terms of cloud first. And you can see some of the organizations that are represented here, Kessel Run, Kobayashi Maru, and so many others who have taken that approach. You can see how fast, how rapidly they're able to build, scale, deploy their applications, build in cloud, and then deploy at the edge on premises.
Excellent, excellent. Guido, any thoughts?
Yeah, also, like to say thanks to everybody here. It's great to see so many familiar faces, both OG and new. So it's good to have everybody in one room. So as far as like the IC and such, I come from 18.5 years in that environment, and I think one of the big things, knowing how they operate, is that it's the agility and the optionality of cloud that brings great speed to a constantly evolving battlefield. And especially as our near-peer adversaries like China, Russia, you name it, are always evolving. They wait for nobody. We are still stuck with this data center kind of mindset, and most of our workforce is focused for that, training, enablement, all that. But really that, just driving to the cloud allows us to use the lightest weight footprint possible at the most cost beneficial factor, and not having to worry about maintaining giant backends and what's my HVAC and what's this and where's it at, and you can lift, shift, move, do everything. If I want a hybrid structure, use Snowball to put it on-prem. It just gives the DoD the flexibility to meet the ever-changing threat that we're always facing.
Indeed. So I want to jump back from the quote-unquote far future from a technology perspective to a somewhat near horizon, next 2 years or so. What can we see from or expect or want from the cloud? Start with you.
Yeah, certainly. So Microsoft at this point have cloud regions available across unclassified, secret, and top secret. And it's taken them some time to get there. What's fascinating is to see that now that we have multiple layers in which we can provide services and products to our DoD and intelligence customers, a lot of that comes down to making sure that parity of services exist. So I know one of the key focuses internal to Microsoft engineering, particularly Microsoft Federal Engineering, is making sure that parity of services exists across the entire technology stack. So customers, and we realize that it takes time to get those services accredited with DISA versus when you're trying to get some services available on the IC environment. So I think it's a work in progress, but over the next 2 to 3 years, we can see a lot of commercial parity being available for our DoD and IC and other government customers, and that should really help accelerate the government's journey in terms of digital transformation and/or really adopting cloud as to be the first and foremost centric way of how they're doing business.
All right, fantastic. Adelina?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at Google, we've definitely taken a different approach to the compliance and accreditation process. So we've taken the approach of accrediting all of our data centers globally, and didn't really buy into initially this sort of GovCloud model. And we know because we did it once, we realized that there was significant feature drift between our sort of commercial and our GovCloud sort of offerings. And then similarly, as we saw sort of with COVID, as different customers scaled considerably because now all of their work was online, we couldn't scale appropriately to meet the demands of customers. And so we've definitely shifted to this approach of ensuring that all of our data centers globally are accredited. And because of that, it has taken us a bit more time. And so we recently received IL4 accreditation for our workspace product, which is huge. And we're actively working with this towards sort of IL5 and IL6 as well. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, fantastic. Guido?
Yeah, so I think this is where we all stand right now. What's the 1 and 2 year mark or 3 year mark for cloud? How do we get there? I think some of the big things that we need to focus on, the DoD wide, is education. People still don't know how to get to cloud. It's this ambiguous, like, weird thing that is unattainable. That hey, drive to cloud. Well, how do I do that? What does that mean? Making repeatable architectures and blueprints of IaaS so that it is easy. And we saw, on the chart earlier with the PaaS presentation, that layer cake that had all of those different layers that an app team is responsible for, is demystifying each one of those, making them cookie cutter repeatable, and building the ATO bounds and hardening of each one of those layers so that they can be pulled off the shelf and used. So that is part of the education process in making it easier. I think the other part is the UX of driving to cloud. Everybody talks about driving cloud. Yep, we're doing it the same way as we stamp agile on things. Great, we're agile. What does that actually mean? No, we actually have to understand the UX of what it takes to change from a data center kind of construct and drive to cloud, and how we get our applications there, how we maintain that, what it looks like, how the processes for our ATO environments and continuous ATO environments continue to evolve to meet those changing needs. And then lastly, I think one of the big shifts that we're going to have, well, actually it's kind of two, is investing more into organizations like Cloud One that actually give us they're going to give us 40% of those guardrails and stacks so that we don't have to ATO all of them. So investing more into there, but also shifting some of the funding from our data centers to upgrade our backbones. The government backbones and networks are garbage. It's hit or miss of what's going to work. I think there's just random monkeys in rooms that are just switching things on and off, because we just have outages for no reason, and we have bandwidth constraints and everything. When we go to cloud and we don't have the ability to go in and touch a system, we're going to need to have those repeatable and redundant networks that have black fiber that we can switch over to. So I really think we're going to see those few things in the upcoming future.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I'll add on to that. Just Microsoft has been making a lot of investments because, as I primarily cover the Air Force, and oftentimes the limitation isn't what it is that we can do in the cloud. They actually many times are advocates and want to do something, but it's a connection from their Air Force base or the location that they are, where they end up developing and using a lot of their applications. How do they connect from where they are to the cloud? And certainly I think Cloud One has done a great job of helping accelerate that, but Cloud One also has a lot of constraints where just the way the architecture is built. So I think evolving the existing DoD flavors of cloud and then making sure that there is better connectivity from the different places where it needs to be so that cloud is more accessible, I think should be areas of investment, and I can see that, some of that happening already. Yeah.
So that brings us to where are we today? We have cloud, edge, and mobile. Your program is working in all three, if I understand correctly. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your successes and challenges with those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess Bespin's unique. We're a software factory that hasn't followed the contract that everybody else did. Everybody's like, hey, I'm going to jump on this platform bandwagon. I'm going to take this behemoth on and use it as part of my stack. And we're like, okay, well, we could do that, but most of our use cases as Bespin were optionality, agility, and being lightweight. How do we drive the lowest cost model? How do we focus on mobile? What does that look like? And so this is because we're the only software factory that is across all functional areas. We're not an A1, 3, 4, whatever, so we have to be able to democratize that across everybody. So we took a look at, hey, how do we do this 3 years ago when we started? We went out to Microsoft and Google. We went through Silicon Valley and just camped out with them for months and say, how do you do this? What do your customers look like? Because I didn't want to just take what everybody else did and accept it as gospel. And we said, okay, well, we're seeing that everybody is driving to an IaaS stack to make it more repeatable. And then we tested it out, and what we found is that the majority, I think the statistic now is about 75% of the top 2,000 companies use IaaS because it is easy, lightweight, optional, cost factor, agility, all those pieces. So we're going to do that. The other piece is that we had to drive across like business systems and IL5 and all those things. So these systems don't get a lot of money. They can't afford all this compute and store backends and make it really expensive. So we had to have, okay, how do I build an ecosystem that teaches people how to do web and mobile and cloud, and then give them all of the capabilities, and not just give them the fishing pole, because if I can give them the fishing pole, that's fine, but teach them how to catch it, clean it, and cook it for both mobile and web and cloud, and then at the end of their journey, they can own it, because they're not beholden on us. That's the same commercial services that anybody can consume, and so they then know how to deliver and manage and actually do Agile and actually know how to do DevSecOps and know how to do the ATO process and have all those built in. So at the end of that whole process, they come out at the end and they're like, sweet, I am a team that can now go back to my functional owner and build more teams and take everything that is there and run with it and propagate. But we had to do that for both mobile and web and lightweight and edge systems and everything. And it's been a phenomenal journey as we're the only software factory doing that. And gosh, I'm trying to think, we've got dozens of applications in production, some all the way up to the CIO of the Air Force and Deputy SecDef and Undersecretary, that they're using our stuff specifically for those optionality.
Oh, nice. Google, you guys got any, specifically kind of edge mobile for DoD kind of a?
Yeah, so on that point, I think one product that we're actively working on right now, and more details I think will be released soon, is our Google Distributed Cloud Hosted, so GDCH, it's quite a mouthful actually, to bring that up with our product managers. GDCH hosted, and essentially what it is, it's what it sounds like. It's a disconnected, air-gapped cloud that will run on sort of the government network, right? And so that's our approach to thinking about the edge. But I'd love to turn it over to you and hear more.
Yeah, certainly. I'll address both parts of the question. So one of the things that we have done to date in terms of helping our DoD customers particularly accelerate their adoption of cloud, what we find is that either customers are being directed to Cloud One, which it should be, right, for applications that can be hosted in that environment. But if that's not for whatever reason, right, not the ideal environment for that organization to be operating in, one of the biggest challenges that these organizations run into is how do we get to an environment that is at least up to impact level 4 or 5 to be able to do even development at times, right? So Microsoft has made a lot of investment in something called a mission landing zone, which is a much newer construct of a work that we had done with Cloud Computing Program Office from DISA called Infrastructure as Code. And these two things are related in the sense that today, customers can come in and they can work with Microsoft and the Cloud Computing Program Office to say, here is a set of scripts that have been built and blessed by a government agency, that if you run them, you can have an environment that is up to impact level 5 or even 6 available, in which you can start development. And that's really helping a lot of our customers not have to worry about how do we even get started in an environment that we know is secure and meets the DoD guidelines. The newer version of infrastructure as code, because it had a lot of opinionations, which some of our customers found to be too constrained, is the concept of mission landing zone, where customers have the flexibility as part of that deployment, but they still get to a point where a lot of those controls are implemented so they can easily achieve impact level 4 or 5 or even 6 compliance when they're operating in Microsoft Azure government or secret clouds. And increasingly, we are seeing that requirement, that need for how do you now go from the cloud to the edge becoming more and more apparent. So we certainly, Microsoft has done a lot of investments in having its edge portfolio of devices. We have multiple form factors that also include hyper-converged infrastructure, to include big boxes that you can easily deploy, container-level data centers that could be easily deployed at the forward edge. But I think for Microsoft, the main point of focus isn't just to be able to provide that as a service, which is somewhat different than what traditional DoD does, where they have to procure the hardware, set up and configure, and then manage it. Microsoft's taken a different approach, like, hey, what if you can just run that hardware? We'll manage the life cycle of it, and if you need to return it and get a new one, it's already part of your subscription paid for. And increasingly, making sure that there is connectivity when there needs to be, but these devices or edge devices can work autonomously, independently in those remote locations for which they are deployed. But when there is connectivity back to the cloud, they're able to take advantage of the cloud services, right? Whether that's for backup recovery, disaster scenarios, or other things. Just having that flexibility to move between edge and the cloud is becoming very important. And this idea of how do you bring mission landing zone that gets you to that secure configuration in the cloud is also now being extended to these edge devices. So having that consistency, not in the cloud, but also at the edge, has been a key area of focus for us, and we're continuing to make a lot of investments in that area. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to pivot now towards a slight pivot. What is and isn't working with kind of where cloud and all these technologies and solutions exist today? And one of the areas that has been challenging, at least recently for me, Cloud One is fantastic for creating appropriate guardrails. A lot of the times when you come in on a GovCloud, for instance, solution that gets you at IL2, and then you have to add additional controls to get you up to IL4. But I think a flip side of that is, again, my experience with Cloud One is in other agencies who have what I'm calling enterprise overlay, cloud overlay offices. So their goal is to create a standard approach to getting their customers, users, up to whatever is the relevant impact level for the purposes of this conversation. But where do we see some additional frictions with kind of, I guess, yes, cloud. Let's use Cloud One kind of as the exemplar for today.
Big thing with Cloud One is the UX. Cloud One was kind of built on this lift and shift methodology. Hey, we're going to build and maintain some kind of baseline of cloud architecture and those guardrails and stuff so that you can bring an application over. First of all, don't ever lift and shift anything unless you hate day two. If you really think your future it needs a lot of work, then just do a lift and shift. I think that's one of the big things with Cloud One, is that they need to work on some of those different things, and we're helping them to do that. Also, funding is always a challenge on any organization, but doing so the UX and understanding how to drive there, being able to streamline that path to production. Being able to remove roadblocks and unified tech stacks is another thing that we need to kind of work through in those different pieces. sharing lessons learned, because, like I said, we, the Air Force, have invested a lot of horsepower and dollars into, hey, let's build this giant platform, when it really isn't kind of how industry is going. So, how can we take and shift that mindset and start to build the lessons learned on, hey, if I'm a PMO, when do I go to a PaaS, or when do I go to an IaaS, and how do we make that more open for everybody, so that it really isn't, it's not confusing when I have to deliver an application to an environment, regardless of who the CSP is. And then, educating them on cost factors for day two, because a lot of our billing and our acquisition strategy is built off of this: buy hardware and I don't have to worry about it. So how can we also work on helping to build a better cost factor analysis of what you're trying to do, base it off of statistical analysis of what things are already in there, different application sizes, so they can palm for the correct dollar, so they can better manage their portfolio, because all these things are a tidal shift from where we have been over the last 30, 40, 50 years to where we go. So maybe there's a lot there. There's still a bunch more that we can tackle, but those are right off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I don't want to pick on Cloud One, because I know everyone has the same issues in the multiple agencies. So I struggle to try to help new users to the cloud with some guardrails, while in essence attempting to scale something that is relatively new to the organization itself as well. And so I'll ask Adelina and Nav if they have any other expertise or commentary, whatever, opinion on what they might recommend for new organizations, and how clouds are moving, hopefully, to move up that level of lift.
Sure. Do you want to go? I'd say I'll start with Cloud One. Certainly Microsoft is a current cloud service provider in the Cloud One ecosystem. And we've also, I support a lot of customers who go through that journey, and to some degree it's good where it is, but there are also quite some pain points, unfortunately, that customers go through. So really focusing on that onboarding journey for customers, getting them to a point where they're able to easily and quickly deploy their applications in the environments for which they're provisioned for, and then helping them get to a point where they can get to production. I think it's still, if you just look at the time it takes for customers to go through that journey, it's anywhere between at least 6 months, if not 6 to 12 months. And that's asking a lot, to be honest, right? For many of these applications that are relatively small in size and just looking to rehost from an on-premises data center into the cloud. So we at Microsoft, being one of the CSPs, we are working directly with the program office, like Bespin, to address many of these gaps that we have come to understand and see over time. And we're really thinking about the next generation of architecture for what Cloud One looks like. Now, it's also important, as we're thinking about Cloud One being not just a cloud for DoD, but like it has multiple cloud service providers. Google's coming on board, Amazon's there, Microsoft's there. Right now, the way the overall systems and the way it's architected, it just still seems like a very siloed and independent approach across multiple clouds. And as customers are thinking about their multi-cloud strategy, I think it's going to be imperative for Cloud One to figure out how to better enable that at the Cloud One level. So that's one thing when it comes to some of the changes that we are driving forward to better support our customers in the DoD. Outside of Cloud One, I think we are seeing a lot of momentum with the M2O office, which is primarily, Cloud One right now only offers up to secret. They offer impact level 4 and 5 in Azure Government, and then for the secret region, impact level 6, that's where they stop. So for customers, DoD customers particularly, who have a need for wanting to run workloads at the top secret level, right now we are working with the M2O office and exploring the idea of how do we build something like Cloud One, but perhaps having learned a lot of the lessons from that experience, how do we make it better as you're working with M2O office to make sure that customers can easily also get to a top secret environment in Azure and other clouds.
Yeah.
Anything?
So not having had the firsthand experience of sort of experiencing these challenges with Cloud One, I would definitely defer to the expertise of the panelists here. But I would echo the great point that Nav made, that this onboarding process is taking quite a bit of time. 6 months is quite a steep sort of ask for the DoD, and I think that we need to ensure that the DoD focuses on their mission as quickly as possible, and having this extensive onboarding process certainly shortcuts into that. Similarly, I would say, or add on that, as Nav mentioned, Google just recently onboarded to Cloud One. So that's really exciting, and we're really looking forward to getting into that work.
Can I add some? We're kind of poking Cloud One a lot. I definitely don't want to give that impression. They've been phenomenal in a lot of things they do, and we've been helping them. I'd like to give some actual statistics to kind of help the crew here understand what it means. So, about a year ago, we were driving to Cloud One. We were doing all these different things, and we were capturing, hey, how long does it take to actually deliver an application? Once we build the application, we have those different pieces. How long does it take to actually drive that into Cloud One? First apps, 800 man-hours. Team of people, 800 man-hours. Next time, 200 man-hours. Next time, 48 hours. Now it's under 16 hours by one senior airman. Pretty good. Like if you could say, hey, all your infrastructure stack, everything, 16 hours, one senior airman, I'd buy that all day long. So they've come a very long way, but it takes these people here to really kind of understand and use and give that feedback and start to do that. Think of it as Tesla. Tesla wouldn't be where they're at without a team of people actually constantly giving feedback and understanding what that is. If you're always choosing a different way, then the way that is in front of you is never going to get refined, and it's just going to, you're just going to beat a bunch of paths through the forest without actually making the path in front of you any better.
Absolutely, and I don't want to pick on Cloud One either, because at the end of the day, there are tons of controls that Cloud One is making transparent to, again, people new to cloud, jumbling through some of the RMF controls on the program I'm on right now, and there's 2,000 CCIs that have to be, each line needed to be spoken for in essence. So yes, but I also appreciate the growing pains and the evolution of Cloud One. Okay, so we're going to skip past compliance and talk a bit about talent management in the interest of time. Now, I'll start with government talent management challenges with cloud, multi-cloud, and where things are today and where you see your people needing to be, et cetera.
Okay, this is a hard one. So we don't have the luxury of all of our industry partners. We get a lot of people, oftentimes, straight from mom's house through the military, and then they show up on our doorstep. I'm trying to think, I roughly have about 96 airmen right now, and that's just airmen, not to mention officers and other. So talent management is kind of a big thing for us as we get these people, we get these bodies that come to us, and our education and training system doesn't actually train them to do the job, because they train them to sit in a seat that was built, the tech stack was built 5-10 years ago. We have to take those people and then make those bodies into people, operational relevance. One of the things that we did, we went out, and actually we were studying with Google, and I'm trying to think, it was just before COVID, we were wondering, hey, how do you maintain all your people all over the world? And then we studied with them for weeks and went through all of their Grow with Google internal. We went out to Uber, Visa, Verizon, Apple. We said, hey, how do you do all of this? And we came back and we found that it was a series of external providers, curriculum providers, to come in and build this hub and spoke architecture to feed all of this best of breed. Like there's training from both Google and Microsoft and Amazon and all of these other organizations to bring it in to train our people. So building that operational understanding of what that airman is supposed to do, that works along with what ATC trains them to do. So they train them on this temporal fashion, what it takes to sit in that chair as they move around the Air Force. And then we train them how to actually be an operational airmen for cyber and cloud so that they can actually understand what that looks like, because they have to have a return on business. And if they don't have a return on business, then we fail our airmen. How many times do we see commercials over and over again, like come be the best, this and that, and we have all these fun lasers and stuff in our commercials, and they get there and they're like, sweet, COBOL, this is nothing like a commercial. Why am I doing this? But it's a supply chain issue. We have to be able to enable them to move rapidly, to understand what that operational footprint is, to not sit there and rest on just compliance and checking the box of, yep, I did this, IT 200 course, and I'm going to go back to my desk and just make PowerPoints. No, return on business investment, changing the course, adjusting for the changing fight, and all of that is one of the things that we built in DU, along with a multitude of other things.
All right. Nav?
Yeah, perhaps I'll just put in a plug. So certainly, I think we certainly also think about how do we better enable our customers so that they're more aware of just cloud in general, and then how can we better support them if they're thinking of Azure as one of the cloud providers. So Microsoft has done an investment. I think it's called like an online skillings initiative, where anybody who has a us.af.mil email address, whether it's a government, military person, or a contractor, they can come in, easily sign up online, and have access to plenty of resources, both online instruction training, as well as they can also schedule in-person instructors to come in and teach. And I think we've also had some integrations done with the wonderful initiative that Bespin has led in making that more accessible to overall DoD. And it's been phenomenal to see. Like, this is amazing how, airmen in the Air Force and all across the services are seeing like this is something that we actually can learn, want to do, and they're now aspiring to be not just moving in the ranks, but also wanting to build the technological skills along the way. And you can see how that's starting to affect in the way programs are being run, because they're now better and able to understand what this cloud thing is, what software development looks like in cloud, and how they can better support the mission of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the panelists here have said it already, but training and enablement is really critical to, sort of making sure that service members, members within the intelligence community have the tools that they need and the understanding of cloud that they need in order to do their job effectively. And I guess I would use my experience coming into Google as a short and brief anecdote to illustrate this point. So prior to coming to Google, I really had really little sort of hands-on technical experience. I was working in the disinformation space. I was working on terrorism, Islamic radicalization specifically, and ethnography in the Balkans. Probably the furthest thing that you could imagine from cloud and cloud applications, right? And so in coming into a customer engineering role, I was really relying on, let's be real, YouTube, but then also once I got to Google, our Google Cloud Skills Boost, which is sort of our internal and external facing training platform that we provide not only for internal Google users, but then also for customers as well to skill up pretty quickly and earn skill badges, so sort of in a gamified way, right, to make it more exciting so you don't lose focus for people like me. And I feel like in my experience, that was a really great way to skill up, sort of as quickly as possible to do the job well. And it's always a learning experience, so really making sure that you have visibility into the customer's journey so that you can help them skill up as appropriate.
Yeah. I'll add on one point. I really commend Google. Actually, they were one of the first cloud providers to make a lot of their courses available for free on Coursera, where a lot of individuals that I've spoken to over time have talked about how much value it has brought to them because it's been so widely accessible. And I think Microsoft has been following the model of how do we make our courses published on Coursera and other platforms like EDX, so that just general cloud knowledge and even advanced technical training is more widely accessible to anybody who wants to learn and do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Oh.
Can I give another example? So I have a lot of airmen. I'm in their lives all day long, 300 and something. I'll give you an example of one of our senior airmen. This senior airman, I'm not going to name his name, joined the military. He was a mechanic. He came from a very low-income family out in the Northeast. Had no idea what cloud was. Came in, started working with us. We said, hey, what are your desires? He's like, I want to know more about cloud. So we said, hey, we're about to set this training up in DU. We're working with Notre Dame, and Trek 10 is one of our people, and in AWS. We're building out how do we make an airman into a cloud expert. This airman said, "Sweet, love to do it." Went through, took the course, not even a month on his part-time. He not only is an expert in his field after a few months, he's leading all of our contractors and other people in there. He, on his own time, taught his cousin, who is out of work and $30,000 in debt, lost his job and everything. His cousin now makes $90K. His mom, who was injured, she had an injury that's been persisting for years. He taught his mom how to what he learned in that same Digital University operational kind of capability. His mom makes over 100K now. She was out of work from an injury. It's just interesting how when you throw a little bit of operational knowledge into a person that has that capability and that desire, and that's just one. We've got hundreds of instances. I can name so many airmen that have kind of transformed, and I mean big A. I mean civilian, officer, enlisted, all of them. So that we really need to work on that a lot.
Yeah, great. We're down to the last 4 minutes or so. I want to open it up to the audience if there are any questions we want to ask the panelists. Or nay.
Only easy questions, by the way, no hard questions.
Same here.
All right, looks like nay. All right, so I'll go ahead and wrap.
There's a question back there.
Yeah.
Jeff Wills, software engineer at Rising. Just curious, the deltas that you see between how the government's utilizing the cloud and then how the commercial world is using the cloud, and then also maybe as a bonus, where do you see government with function as a service? Because I don't think they're really utilizing that today.
Sure. Yeah. Any?
Take that one first.
Sure.
Yeah. Or either or.
I do see there is certainly commercial cloud is always going to be a little bit further in terms of the availability of services as well as the adoption. So you see, I've come across organizations, primarily startups and or businesses who are building products, and they don't even think about even building containers. All they're doing is deploying pieces of code that's running as functions, and that's how they build an entire architecture. So certainly there's a lot. And DoD is just trying to figure out how do we containerize maybe some legacy applications as well as trying to modernize the way of building and delivering software. So that's certainly a little bit behind in terms of where commercial is, but I think it's quickly catching up. Right? We see efforts and initiatives led by organizations such as Cloud One, Platform One, DoD, DevSecOps reference architecture. A lot of the work that's being done by Castle Run, Bespin, Kobayashi Maru, and other software organizations, even software engineering groups that are primarily responsible for managing legacy software. They're starting to adopt modern technologies and cloud practices to be able to build and deliver, or at least maintain the status quo and figure out what that next generation looks like. In terms of I think there is difference, and certainly commercial world doesn't have to deal with a lot of the, I'd say, some of the challenges that typically DoD has to deal with when it comes to DoD, ATO processes. Like commercial can move a lot faster. Not that security isn't important for them, but they're able to address it a little bit differently than how DoD addresses it. What was the second part of the question?
Function as a service.
Yeah.
So we're down to the last couple minutes.
Sure.
So I'm sorry.
Do another question.
Sure. Let's take another question. Did you have? No?
I was going to ask a question about JWCC. I know you mentioned it earlier. I think somebody said JEDI earlier. It's my understanding from JWCC, Google, Azure, AWS, maybe Oracle will all be part of that. What's the onboarding for that, and what are the shared services model going to look like that for people that are trying to do multi-cloud? Could you provide us a little bit more information on that?
Adelina? No?
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure how to answer that, quite frankly. Do you guys have an idea?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that either. I think just because the contract hasn't been awarded, we know it's going to be multi-cloud, but I'd say just for brevity, I think we're trying to figure out how we are seeing the C2E model working and see what we can learn from that as the next year, the JWCC contract is being awarded. But I think it'll be similar to C2E contract in terms of, all the major cloud providers would be available. They'll be able to list the set of services that are available, right? And you'll be working with the account teams or teams that you might be interested in. open bidding for task orders, and then different cloud providers can compete based on what they have to bring in addition to the products and services. That'd be my understanding.
Yeah.
All right. You in the back?
But there was another question back there. Yeah.
Like in a quick 30 seconds, where do you see yourself in growth that you plan on doing over the next year, or either where you work or yourself personally?
I'll have somebody else go first.
Do we have enough time to answer?
Not really, but
Yeah.
go ahead.
So next year, really demystifying and being able to have anybody come in and consume cloud and drive an application of production very easily. Like that whole streamlined process. So essentially, Bespin, think of having a very tailored, easy glide slope to get to Cloud One and demystify that whole process where I see myself affecting change. I don't care if I have to give back money on my pay. I just want to affect change. I think too many people chase the almighty dollar and do this and that, but we need to focus on how we eat this giant elephant that's in front of us.
All right. I'm sorry we're all out of time. In fact, we're over by 30 seconds, so I want to wrap this up. My pitch as a cloud engineer is cloud is awesome. It's a beast. Get on it. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.